Ethan, Tomi, welcome back to The Issue Is.
Great to be here with you, Alex.
Great to be with you from afar. Of course, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, but don't worry, I am still plenty fired up about California politics and follow them very closely.
All right, well, let's start, though, with your reaction to what's happening away from America in Afghanistan. Tomi, your reaction to that situation?
I think it's very simply put an unmitigated disaster. This is what happens when you have a commander-in-chief who is asleep at the wheel. This is what happens when you have a Democrat Party that is more consumed with climate change and wokeness and defunding the police than protecting and defending Americans wherever they may be. I don't think anybody would argue that we shouldn't withdraw from Afghanistan. It's the way that it was done. It was how poorly it was planned. It's the lack of information and answers we've been given from this administration that I think is so infuriating. It's an outrage. It is inexcusable. And I'd like to see anybody try to say otherwise because it's quite obviously a disaster.
Ethan,
well, I'll say otherwise. Look, we have two sets of issues that happened here. First was the previous president actually is the one who released 5,000, negotiated to release 5,000 Taliban prisoners, including the new leader of the Taliban in Afghanistan. And he's the one who negotiated a full withdrawal of U.S. troops by May the 1st, of which Joe Biden actually honored that negotiation that happened under the former president. Further, the second big point that I think isn't talked about enough was the prior administration failed to work with the incoming Biden administration for a smooth transition. So when Joe Biden and his team took over in January, there wasn't the traditional 2 months of exchange of information. And Joe Biden did what was necessary, what both President Trump and President Biden promised to do, which was to get us out of Afghanistan. Look, there's no clear, clean, easy way to withdraw from a messy war, which we should have never been in.
Tomi, does the former president bear any responsibility here?
I can tell you this, if Donald Trump were still in charge, the desert would be quaking right now. We can talk about the former president, and I know that yesterday when Joe Biden was asked by our own Peter Doocy about that answer, he botched it entirely, and what he usually does is blame the former president. Now, talking about negotiating with the Taliban, talking about trying to broker some kind of a peace deal, that's an aside. I think we all know that President Trump, as commander-in-chief, would not leave Americans stranded in Afghanistan with no plan to evacuate them, and then would not have U.S. officials share the names of Americans and Afghan allies with the Taliban to help them evacuate. An unmitigated disaster. We do need to withdraw from Afghanistan. That is something that our former president also wanted to do. But to go back on Ethan's point, the prior administration tried time and time again to talk to the Biden administration and the incoming Biden administration about ways to protect and defend our country, both at our southern border and abroad. Those were largely ignored. Those conversations were largely ignored. And you can see because President Biden undid almost everything that President Trump did to protect and defend this nation, starting with our southern border.
So he didn't communicate. Tomi, he didn't communicate. Actually, they specifically refused to share the information with the Biden administration. Furthermore, you're ignoring, when you talk about leaving Americans behind, let's talk about Otto Warmbier in North Korea. That was under Donald Trump's watch. Let's talk about the Kurds in Syria, which he abandoned for their slaughter at the hands of the dictator Bashar al-Assad, and then the Russians behind them. What was he negotiating with Vladimir Putin during all of that? Why is it that Russia is getting the upper hand in all of these regions where Donald Trump was interfering and not supporting U.S. allies? That's a big question that's never been answered satisfactorily for the American public.
Ethan, all day long, we can go to whataboutisms of our former president, Donald Trump. I'm happy to talk about Donald Trump, but the situation is this. Our commander-in-chief, the person that is in that White House, is Joe Biden. He bears responsibility for everything that happens on his watch. He was perfectly happy to undo almost everything that the Trump administration did in 4 years. So to now place this on Donald Trump's shoulders and say it was his fault is just whataboutisms. Let's talk about the situation on the ground. And I would like to ask you, if I may, Alex, I would like to ask Ethan if he thinks that this president has done a satisfactory job of dealing with Afghanistan and answering questions about the dealing of Afghanistan.
I do, and he's gotten almost 100,000 people removed from Kabul, which nobody thought was possible in this time frame. He still has until August 31st. Furthermore, the U.S. government actually put out a warning before those 13 American soldiers were killed by ISIS terrorists. And remember, that's the ISIS that Donald Trump went on TV and declared defeated, which clearly was not the case. Further, let's take it a step further here. You're making such a big deal over Afghanistan. What about hundreds of thousands of dead Americans here in the United States? What about the 73 Americans that were killed in Afghanistan during the previous administration? What about the 120 U.S. soldiers who were killed in Afghanistan and Iraq in those short 4 years? They weren't a big outrage by the right when that was happening. There are many of us on the left who've been calling for us to get out of those foreign wars since we actually entered them under another Republican president, George Bush.
All right, well, Tomi, let's talk, though, about the situation on the ground, because we can get into all these other places. Afghanistan right now, you say you want the U.S. to pull out. What does that look like, given the conditions on the ground right now? What should we do from here?
There should have been a better withdrawal plan to begin with.
That's that's another debate. Where do we go now, though?
Where do we go from here? Well, first of all, you don't leave our weapons in our war chest to the enemy. You don't trust the Taliban. The Taliban has made it very clear that they are no ally of ours. So the fact that, as I mentioned before, that U.S. officials gave the names of Americans and Afghan allies to our enemy is absolutely inexcusable and astounding. Where do we go from here? We make sure that every American is out and out safely. We have the military capability to do that. We have the greatest military force on the face of the earth. We have every capability to go over there. Now, yesterday, Joe Biden said that those that are responsible will be hunted down. I don't think any American believes that so, but we have the absolute ability to go and make sure every American. And earlier this week, you'll recall the Biden administration and many of his officials were saying that they're not sure if they can get everybody out, that maybe people shouldn't be over there in the first place, or maybe even that they want to stay there, which is absolutely ridiculous that they would put that forth.
Ethan, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so look, we don't re-enter the war theater. That is the wrong move. We use special forces in a limited fashion as needed. We continue the withdrawal. We work with our allies to do so. And we make sure to not do this again. Let us learn the lesson that we didn't learn from Vietnam, that we apparently have made the mistake of again in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is not where we should be going into war zones. The war profiteers are the ones who pound on those drums to lead us there. Let's learn, let's take care of our veterans back home. Let's make sure that veterans who get ill here in the United States don't die because there isn't an ICU bed available due to an unmitigated COVID disaster, because of the topic we're probably going to be discussing next.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but let's talk more about the recall election right now, which all recent polls show is a toss-up. If you're a registered voter in California, you should have your ballot right now. Of course, there are twice as many Democrats in the state, so the governor's main goal right now is to try to turn those Democrats out. The Bay Area rally with Vice President Harris canceled this week due to the situation in Afghanistan. It's not clear if it's ever going to be rescheduled or if President Biden will end up coming to California to campaign for the governor. The governor was hoping that they would help him. Let's talk more broadly about the recall question. We know that question 1 on the ballot: should Governor Newsom be recalled? Tomi, I know you have strong thoughts on this. Why should he be?
Oh, I think it's obvious. Look at the failed state of California. And I know what Ethan's probably going to say. He's going to tout that it's the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. All great things. It is home to great academic institutions. It's home to Hollywood. It's home to Silicon Valley. All wonderful things. It is a great state. It has abundant resources and beauty. It has the two of you there, which make it even more beautiful. So why then does it have the highest income inequality when you account for cost of living? Why do you have gas prices through the roof? Why do you have a homeless crisis that this governor has said to have addressed? But if anybody has taken a trip to Santa Monica, Venice, or San Francisco, they know that not to be the case. And also, when you look at the numbers and you compare places like California and New York to other states that chose freedom, that chose prosperity, both economically and freedom of choice when it comes to health and wellness, when you look at the COVID numbers, there is little, if any, difference in the way that that governor handled your state. It was, again, a disaster. And that is why you had over 1.7 million Californians, not Republicans, 1.7 million Californians that stood up, that stood out and said we need to recall this governor, and they're going to do it.
Yeah, 1.7 million in a state, though, of 40 million people. Ethan, your response.
Yeah, this was a fever dream of the right that was paid for by the RNC and other Trump supporters as a court upheld to be stated in the mailings. That's who's behind this. It's hatred for any Democrat. It's very simple. Governor Gavin Newsom has done an amazing job leading this state through a horrific pandemic that has killed over 600,000 Americans. Let's not lose sight of that. Over 600,000 Americans. He's the one who took the lead, unlike places like Florida and Texas, where they're now having record numbers of deaths and overloaded hospitals where regular people are being turned away and dying as a result. 1,000 people a week are dying of COVID in places like Florida right now. We cannot allow California to turn into a Florida. Look, Gavin Newsom led, and that's what is scary for the Republicans, is how dare he actually lead and keep us safe.
We know, though, Ethan, that the talking point is that it's a Republican recall, but there are Democrats that are supporting this. There are Democrats that signed that petition, and there are Democrats that are frustrated by some of the closures that we saw in the state, some things like EDD reform that has not happened, other places. I mean, there is Democratic frustration, no?
Oh, there's no
question. Or at
question.
least apathy.
There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, I'm the first one who will speak up about things like right here in Los Angeles, we had a supervisor who, after voting to close outdoor dining, went and ate at a restaurant. That is terrible. We need to do better, but that doesn't mean you get rid of the person who is leading that charge and doing it from a place of caring for Californians. Furthermore, you have to look at issues like anytime there is a disagreement with a governor, we don't recall him. There's a scheduled election next year for governor. If you don't like Gavin Newsom, you vote next year to remove him instead of spending $250 million in taxpayer dollars for something that is just the angry right wants to take on against a Democratic governor. One last thought on that one as well that nobody really talks about. The turnout isn't as important as everybody wants to make it be, because every registered voter in California gets mailed a ballot. Democrats can sit home in their underwear and vote no on question 1, and Gavin Newsom stays our governor.
But that still takes a little bit of effort for people to do that. There has been some apathy among the Democrats, though. Tommy, your response to Ethan's point, which is really what the governor has his main argument right now, which is that these Republican candidates are going to take us off a COVID cliff, and that the numbers right now in places like Florida, Texas, Louisiana, way worse when it comes to COVID than here in California.
Well, I know we're going to get to the COVID discussion later, but if you want to talk about states that are also doing very poorly with COVID, look at Hawaii, which has very strict COVID restrictions, and they're seeing a huge spike in cases. So we will discuss COVID later.
A lot of tourists there, though. I mean, Hawaii has a lot of people coming in and out from all over the country. That's their whole economy based on it, right? And it's literally an island.
The governor told people to stop coming. So we're going to get to COVID later. I'm happy to discuss it. Trust me, I have plenty of thoughts on COVID. But I want to talk about Governor Gavin Newsom. You mentioned you had folks there in LA that were dining out. You also had Governor Gavin Newsom dining out at the French Laundry. I think that really was the tipping point when he told everybody not to gather, to stay home. And he was there unmasked with his cronies at the French Laundry. That was a big point. But listen, this is more than just a recall. Again, I understand the point that we could just vote him out when the opportunity presented itself. But this is a message that Californians are sending, not only to Gavin Newsom, but to every Democrat tyrant that wants to lead that state. Be heard, California. You will not deal with the tyranny. You will not deal with the arbitrary restrictions, the moving goalposts. You will not deal with this hypocrite, Gavin Newsom, who at every turn has been a hypocrite. He has led his state poorly, and that's why you're seeing this recall effort. And to go back to your point about this being a Republican recall, if Republicans had such a pull in California, you wouldn't see a deep blue California. If we were really able to mount this extraordinary effort and get rid of your governor and amass these signatures, then you would see a whole lot of work done in California. That is not the case. This is Californians who watched the way that their tyrant, hypocrite leader led during COVID, and they said, enough of this, and they sent a message.
Well, we'll see if indeed they do send a message in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be interesting to see. But we want to talk more about that recall panel in a moment. Our panel is sticking around for more. Let's talk about the field of candidates hoping to replace Governor Newsom with our panel this week. Progressive attorney Ethan Bearman and conservative commentator Tomi Lahren of Fox Nation. Ethan, let's start with you. What do you make of the rise of Larry Elder?
Well, I think Larry Elder is actually a perfect example of where the Republican Party is today. It's so far off the deep end, it doesn't even connect with people who live and work in the state of California. And worse, what happened to Larry Elder this week with the accusations, a police report filed by his former producer and ex-girlfriend, Alexandra Datig, accusing him of threatening her with a gun while high on marijuana, according to the allegation, shows what kind of candidate we maybe have leading the Republicans right now. Furthermore, there was another scandal that I believe I saw this morning about one of his hired consultants for his campaign as well that is under investigation. That is the state of the Republican Party in California. Californians don't want the Republicans in charge, and we show it every time we vote.
We should say, by the way, that Larry Elder strongly denies those allegations. He has not been charged with any sort of crime when it comes to those allegations, and she just filed that police report this week, but did not file it at the time. And she has endorsed another candidate in the race, Kevin Faulconer. Tommy, your thoughts on Larry Elder. Is he totally off base from where Californians are at?
Listen, I have spent quite a bit of time with Larry Elder over my career. He's been excellent to me. He's been a wonderful man. He's been a wonderful leader and a wonderful voice in our party. And I'd also like to point out that Ethan didn't have anything to say about Larry Elder's policies. He had everything to say about alleged scandals. We can talk about alleged scandals all day. We can talk about President Biden and his accusations. We can talk about Cuomo. We can do that all day long if you'd like. I'd like to talk about policies. And I'll tell you this, Larry Elder believes in freedom for Californians. You guys lost a House seat because so many people are leaving California. Clearly, people are unhappy with things as they are, business as usual, and that's why you're seeing this recall effort. To say that Californians are happy with their state is a blatant lie, because you wouldn't be this close to a recall of your leader if that were the case. Larry Elder is an excellent man. He also represents the best of what the Republican Party has to offer. And if he were a Democrat, had a D behind his name, being a black man, I have a feeling that folks like Ethan would be cheering him on every step of the way. He represents diversity. He represents a strong voice. And the reason you're seeing such a rise because of Larry Elder and with Larry Elder's entrance into this race is because Californians know that he is tough, that he believes in freedom, and that he is a true leader. He's proven that time and time again.
But his policies, Tommy, are anti-worker. He wants no minimum wage. He wants to open us up to be Florida by removing all COVID restrictions. He doesn't believe in core values that Californians have voted for decades now. We support minimum wages. We support worker protections. He doesn't support any of that. He wants to get rid of all of that. And somebody like Larry Elder, should he actually win if Gavin loses on question 1, would do everything in his power using the executive branch, which doesn't get used in California, to try and get rid of that in less than 1 year till our next election.
Well, I mean, the executive branch is used quite a bit in California, certainly in the last year. Some would say that's part of the reason why we're seeing this recall in the first place. Tommy, you initially endorsed Caitlyn Jenner. We haven't seen her take off in terms of the polls so far. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of conservatives were looking for somebody that they could put their power behind, and Caitlyn Jenner certainly had the name recognition. I am still a fan of Caitlyn Jenner, by the way. I'm not entirely sure if she is ready to be governor of California, but I think that her heart and her policies are in the right place, and I hope that she sticks around the Republican Party because we could learn a lot from her, and I will stick to that. But I think once Larry Elder entered, a lot of folks were very comfortable with him, having heard from him for years. And I think California needs a big change. And Larry Elder represents that. And for many of us in the conservative party and movement, he represents freedom, and he represents somebody that has true leadership and a great voice behind him. And to Ethan's point about Larry Elder wanting to undo everything that Californians have voted for and the fact that he's going to come in and take over the state, we know that that is simply not the case. What you need is you need freedom. You need businesses to be able to operate. And I will tell you this, there are so many Californians that have evacuated California to go to places like Florida. So should you be so lucky to have a little bit of your state modeled after that gray free state that all of your residents are fleeing to?
And by the way, just for the record, California actually has had population increase. We've just had less of population increase than some other states. That is why they are getting more congressional seats, not like we have had a ton of people fleeing. There was a small number of people that left just last year, but a lot of that is believed to be due to COVID. All right, let's talk about another candidate, former San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer. A lot of people thought he was going to be the Republican frontrunner. He's trying to find a place for himself. He's kind of struggled in terms of the polls. He's trying to go now to the center right. Here's some of his new ad.
California is in crisis, but we shouldn't just replace one dysfunctional governor with another. Experience and character matter. As San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer.
So Ethan, you see him there trying to go after both Newsom and Elder, trying to get Democrats potentially to support him. What do you make of Faulconer's strategy? And do you think of him as somebody you might vote for question two?
You know, that's a great question, Alex. Faulconer, Mayor Faulconer, is really, if the Republican Party is ever going to recover in the state of California, it's Kevin Faulconer. I mean, it is that kind of Republican, the traditional, more Reagan-esque, pro-economy, while still recognizing that we need to protect our environment, we still need worker protections, we still embrace immigration in this state. That is the kind of Republican that has a future in the state of California, not the Trump-style Larry Elder, far right. So Kevin Faulconer, you know, look, I think more Republicans, if they really are interested in rebuilding here, that's the guy you get behind. I'm not voting for him. I voted for Gavin Newsom, and I'll vote for Gavin Newsom again next year. But Kevin Faulconer brings some hope, I think, to the Republican
So you're
Party.
leaving question two blank?
I did leave it blank. I already mailed in my ballot.
So you don't think that that's taken away your own ability to vote for somebody like Faulconer, who might be more moderate than somebody like Larry Elder?
No, and I also support the lawsuit regarding the constitutionality of this recall.
Tomi, I know you're concerned about the way people are voting.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the fact that you guys have legal ballot harvesting, we've already seen in Torrance over 300 ballots recovered from a man passed out in a 7-Eleven parking lot. There was other footage of 2 females with a master key in an apartment complex stealing ballots. When you have a state that allows for ballot harvesting, you're opening up a whole myriad of vulnerabilities. You also have
Let's explain what ballot harvesting is for people that may not know. Ballot harvesting is this idea that you could turn in a bunch of ballots together at one time and sign off to allow somebody to turn in your ballot for you.
Right. Essentially, someone can come knock on your door and say, hey, you want help filling out that ballot? I could sure do it for you. Just sign here and I'll take care of it. So it opens up a whole lot of vulnerabilities. California, of course, has legalized that. Many states have not, for good reason. But you have mass mail-in voting, which is new to a lot of the United States, not new to California. You also have illegal immigrants who are able to get on those voter rolls because you are automatically put on the voter rolls when you get your driver's license. And we know in California, illegal immigrants can get a driver's license. It's actually up to them to opt out and keep themselves off the voting rolls. If anybody believes that that's going to happen with regularity, they are fooling themselves. But as I mentioned, the remote access vote by mail system, which is essentially a print your own at-home ballot, and you can mail that sucker in any envelope of your choosing and sign it anywhere and send it on in.
Those are great right-wing talking points, but that's not how it works here. You actually have to sign it. They do signature matching in California like other states. It is illegal, and furthermore, the evidence is clear. In the last election where California did all mail-in ballots available to all registered voters, the majority in this country of voter fraud were people voting for Donald Trump, not Democrats voting for their candidates. That's what the evidence shows. That's what the court cases show. And the state of California matches signatures and doesn't allow people who aren't U.S. citizens to vote.
Ethan, if you think that by putting illegal immigrants automatically on the voter rolls when they get their driver's license that they can get in,
that's not
how it works, Tomi. They don't. If you're not a citizen, they are not. No, they're not put on the voter rolls. They're actually automatically not put on the voter rolls. No. So that is a misnomer that the right has been putting out there, and that's not how it works.
That's untrue. It's up to them to opt out, but we can discuss that. I want to talk about your remote access vote by mail. Print your own at-home ballot, mail it in any envelope of your choosing.
I couldn't print my own ballot. I had to use the one that's marked.
So that is a system that's set up specifically for people with disabilities. Right. There is a process that somebody there has to go through, and there's also a verification process for that as well.
It was a system for those that were disabled or those that were in active duty overseas. Not anymore. Now anybody can request a remote access vote by mail. You can print it out, fill it out at home, mail it in any envelope of your choosing. And again, I'm still waiting for answers on if you can print more than one. I'm still waiting answers on what happens if it bleeds through on your own paper. I'm still waiting for answers on the envelope choice. Haven't gotten those yet. But again, California is excellent at assuring voter fraud possibilities.
They're great. It's all theory, and it's not happening in reality. And that our last election showed that we had a fully intact election, that there was not any voter fraud, that was beyond single digits in very limited areas. It just is not the case.
All right, we're going to have more with our panel after a quick break.
They are both promoting exact same position, walking off a COVID cliff and following the Ron DeSantis and the Texas model. So I would suggest they're much more similar than they appear.
That was Governor Newsom on the issue is last week with me, making his pitch for vaccine and mask mandates. All the Republicans running to replace him and the top Democrat, Kevin Paffrath, all say they want to get rid of those vaccine and mask mandates as governor. Let's dig into this with Tomi Lahren of Fox Nation, progressive attorney Ethan Bearman. Tomi, the governor says that these mandates are saving lives. Why is he wrong?
Well, he's absolutely wrong. And anytime you take away personal freedom and choice, that is wrong on a number of levels. And I've often cautioned people, once you start giving your rights away, you likely won't get them back. And that has been the story of California, the first state to lock down, one of the last states to reopen, now following the New York model of mask mandates and vaccine mandates. Listen. A person's health decision, whether they choose to be vaccinated or not be vaccinated, is between them and their doctor. It is not up to your tyrant governor to decide. And the fact that he is making the unvaccinated feel as though they are lepers and degenerates, that they can't go in and eat a cheeseburger or go in and get a steak like he has done at the French Laundry without a vaccine card, is utterly ridiculous, especially for somebody who is against voter ID laws. Make it make sense, Ethan.
Well, he has not put out a vaccine mandate to go to restaurants. I mean, the governor hasn't done that.
That is the discussion, which is the New York model, which is that you'd have to show vaccine verification to essentially be able to live normal life. That's the discussion. I'm sure if he wasn't so terrified by this upcoming recall, that would have already been implemented. But we know that he is very scared of putting down any more tyranny, because that is what got him in this mess in the first place.
Although San Francisco is basically doing what you're suggesting. The local officials there chose to do that. Ethan, your comments.
Yeah, I mean, so George Washington, our founding fathers, they were tyrannical, horrible human beings that required people to get vaccines. They passed in 1796 an act relative to quarantine, authorizing federal officers to go and enforce local and state quarantine and public health laws. This is the founding of our country has recognized that during pandemics and major outbreaks, the public health is greater than your concept of freedom and liberty. Your freedom is there if you want to go live in a cabin in the woods like Ted Kaczynski and not participate in society. We don't live alone in little separate colonies anymore. And even when we did, our founding fathers said, you're going to have to get a vaccine or you're in trouble. You can get in, the state of Massachusetts, Jacobson v. Massachusetts, a conservative Supreme Court in 1905 said, yes, the state can enforce this with penalties against you. It's a mandatory vaccine is allowed. It does not violate your rights, the due process rights, the 14th Amendment, Equal Protection Clause. Those are all valid. The Sixth Circuit just the other day said, again, a mandatory mask mandate doesn't violate any of those liberties that Tomi was just talking about. You're not alone. Hyper-individualism in this country, that whole attitude from the far right now, is killing people. It's damaging our children. Look, even if you don't die from COVID, long-term neurological damage is being well documented in long haulers, along with heart damage, along with lung damage. Let us take a little bit of precaution for our fellow Americans, put on a mask, and if you don't have a valid medical reason to avoid getting a vaccine, because look, there are people with legitimate medical reasons not to get a vaccine. If you're healthy enough to get a vaccine, do it for yourself, for your family, so don't leave your family destitute when you're intubated in a hospital.
Tomi, what do you say to his point that George Washington was inoculating against smallpox? I mean, that this does have a very long history in America.
That was a very nice infomercial against freedom that Ethan just gave us there. Appreciated bringing up George Washington. You know that Democrats love the Constitution when they can cherry pick in which way that they apply it, and our founders and our founding fathers. Normally they're wanting to destroy statues, but that's another point. Listen, also, you have to make this make sense to me. If vaccines are so effective, why do you want a mask mandate? So if you want people to get their vaccine, making them wear a face diaper is a great way to make sure that they don't do that. You've taken away all the incentives for people to actually go and get that vaccine. Another thing I will say is this. It is a personal choice. And considering all the lawlessness that goes on a daily basis in California, the fact that you are treating the unvaccinated like they are indeed the bandits and the problems with society is very laughable to me. But I'll also say this. We also do not know the true side effects of the vaccine. We've got one vaccine that has been FDA approved. The other two have not. So it is still largely an experimental vaccine. And I love folks that try to compare this to measles, mumps, rubella that have been time tested and true. We've got a Pfizer FDA approved vaccine, which the studies have still not been completed, by the way.
So Tomi, are you aware that the University of Wisconsin during the AIDS epidemic, the University of Wisconsin in the early 1990s is who started these mRNA vaccines. They're not new. The MERS and SARS vaccine is the same exact technology. It's not experimental. As a matter of fact, this vaccine now, with over 4 billion, closing in on 5 billion doses administered, is the most widely used vaccine now in the world. It's not experimental. There's next to nothing experimental. And if you bother reading the ingredient list, unlike the MMR vaccine, of which some people had legitimate concerns about heavy metals, for example, like mercury or aluminum, this has none of those dirty ingredients. This is such a simple and clean vaccine. As a matter of fact, that might be one of the things that's causing us to need a third shot as a booster, which, by the way, I'm ready to get one.
Oh, I'm sure that you'll get as many boosters as they offer, Ethan, and that's up to you. That's your personal decision. If you want to wear 1 mask, 2 masks, 3 masks, shoot up that vaccine as many times.
Are you a nudist too, though? You're complaining about masks. You called it a face diaper. So this is the argument. It's an article of clothing that is 70 to 89%, according to the preponderance of scientific literature, 70 to 89% effective at transmitting respiratory illnesses like SARS-CoV-2. And if you don't want to wear an article of clothing that's for the public health, right? No shoes, no shirt, no service is meaningless. Let's be nude. Why wash our hands? Nudity is our next thing, because that's what you're talking about. It's an article of clothing.
These false equivalencies are so ridiculous. The fact that your Lord Fauci went from don't mask to mask, to now you can unmask, now you need to mask again. It's these arbitrary restrictions.
It's not arbitrary. There weren't enough masks for medical professionals.
But Tomi, is it possible though that the science has changed? I mean, just like everything's evolving, the Delta variant is more transmissible, and it's changed the situation on the ground. And also, the vaccines do become less effective over time. That's the need for the booster shot. I mean, isn't that kind of following the science?
Alex, I'll tell you this, the science seems to change on a weekly basis. I think we all know that. It's changed time and time again. The CDC guidance has changed time and time again.
But isn't that the scientific process? When you learn more, you try to put the information out there?
I would like to see the scientific process play out on the vaccines and any possible side effects. Also, we still don't know the side effects of masking kids for 7 or 8 hours a day. We're still awaiting results on that. And if everybody wore a mask and changed their mask every time they touch their face, maybe you would have an argument for your face diapers. But if you, as well as I know, that people are touching their masks, they're essentially wearing the germs strapped across their face for hours on end. We can talk about masks in a moment. But I will say this, when it comes to masks, when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to the pandemic as a whole, the beginning of this thing, we were given the 2-week flatten the curve lie. And now the goalposts have been moved to we need to eradicate COVID. We're not going to eradicate COVID.
If a third of the people aren't going to do what they need to do, it's not a lie. That means you literally have a third of the population who's doing what you're saying, Tomi, and saying, I don't need a mask, I don't need a vaccine, I don't need to social distance, I don't need to take any precautions. That's what destroyed the 2 weeks. By the way, the flattening of the curve was to prevent an overwhelming of our ICUs like we're now seeing in Texas and Florida. We have actual veterans from Afghanistan who are dying because they can't get into an ICU because they're filled with COVID patients with a gallstone. That just happened.
I love that you use the anecdotes, but I want to ask you a very important question. Can you and your governor and your Democratic comrades, can you really be serious about trying to talk about the pandemic and really try to talk about COVID when you're allowing 1 million plus illegal immigrants into our country, unvetted, untested, unvaccinated? Can you really be serious about trying to contain this pandemic when you're so for this open border that we currently have?
Absolutely. There's no such thing as an open border. That's a red herring. Secondly, the data shows that the people who are coming into our country actually have a lower COVID infection rate than actual American citizens. So that is a lovely red herring that the right likes to use, and it's not based on fact.
So, okay, we're taking us to a different place, and there could be an argument about whether we should have more testing or more vaccines at the border as well. That's a whole nother thing. Tomi, I mean, you don't have to answer this question, but did you get vaccinated, and do you have any plans to get vaccinated?
I'll proudly say no, and here's my reasoning for it. I'm a 29-year-old healthy individual. I take care of my health. I go to the gym. I run. I'm not scared of COVID. I haven't been scared of COVID. I haven't gotten COVID. It's my personal decision not to be vaccinated. I choose not to. I'm not here to tell anybody to get it or not to get it. That is not my place. That is your personal decision, and I hope that everybody makes it for themselves in consultation with their doctor and others with whom they trust.
All right, well, Ethan, we know that you have, and you're looking forward to that booster shot. And last question, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, Tomi, is life more fun as a blonde?
Life is fun when you're in a free red state, and I hope that for Californians. And folks, you are so close in California. You are almost past that finish line of getting rid of Gavin Newsom. If you've seen what Democrats have done to our country, you've seen what Democrats have done to California, it's time to make a change.
All right, we're going to leave it there, and that seems like the perfect way to leave it with you, Tomi Lahren. Ethan Bearman, great to see you both. Thank you so much for a spirited discussion, and we love having a free flow of ideas, and we welcome a respectful debate from both of you.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be here.